Cheers to Wednesday.
Woohoo, hump day. We hope you've had a good week thus far, and we're glad you're joining us this evening for our next adventure with Thelma and Louise. And what are we going to talk about this week, Louise?
Rolls. We're going to talk about rolls. What's your favorite kind of roll?
Well, my favorite kind of roll would actually be a caramel roll. I didn't think I'd had very many caramel rolls over winter, but I seem to have developed body rolls as the winter has progressed along. So I'm a little bit reluctant to be eating a bunch of those caramel rolls because I have to find a dress for a wedding that's coming up in September.
And I've been watching the number of rolls that I've been eating because I still have to fit into my dress in September. So that's a good thing that we go walking every night.
Unless it's too windy, too warm,
it rains,
too cool.
It's too far to drive into town.
Prefer that walking on the tar. So we've been trekking into Princeburg and checking out the houses in Princeburg in the evenings for our walk. And I enjoy that very much with you, Louise.
Oh, I do too, Thelma.
Thanks.
I look forward to it. But really the rolls that we're going to talk about.
Hey, did you make caramel rolls for Kyle?
Why, yes, Thelma, I did.
And how did that go?
Oh, just great. So in an effort to change up our weekend breakfast routine, I may or may not have volunteered to make these delicious ice cream caramel rolls that I grew up with. And I spent all week hyping them up, and much to my surprise, I learned that instead of making the rolls the night before like you're supposed to do, leaving the bread dough in the refrigerator is not advisable, especially when it still is in the bag.
Remember I told you, when you bake, follow the recipe. When you cook, you can do whatever you want.
I know. But, you know, on a positive note, the rolls still turned out and he's gonna keep me, so
I'd keep you too, Lacey.
We'll try him again. And speaking of that famous recipe that we have, you can find that on our website. So make sure you head over there. Just follow the recipe when you're baking, and you can venture off the recipe when you're cooking.
Correct. There is a difference between baking and cooking.
Just
telling you, it's many, many years of experience and a few rolls along the way. But we're not here to talk about fat rolls today.
We're here to talk about fabric rolls, like 2.5-inch jelly rolls.
So there are fat rolls and skinny rolls with fabric rolls as well. I prefer the 1.5-inch, the honey bun rolls.
And both are very fun. Both have been around for, we figured, 10 or so years?
At least. Not quite to the antique stage, but you know, they're approaching it. And so my very first quilt I did with the jelly roll, because jelly rolls actually came out before the honey buns did. Moda had an order when they put out those pre-cuts. So jelly rolls were 42 2.5-inch strips. So it was a fabric strip of each of the fabrics that were in the collection. So these kinds of rolls make great scrappy quilts, which if you like scrappy, it's good. If not, it forces you out of your box. And you're going to learn that if those fabrics are in that roll, they should all blend together whether your eyes tell you they do or they don't. So you just have to trust the designer of the fabrics, sew them together, and I think you're going to be pleased in the end with your result. So this quilt is called Truffles. It is available on our website as a downloadable pattern.
And for any of you that ventured out in 2012 to do Quilt Minnesota and you bought yourself a cookbook, you're going to find
people
Truffles
if you did that
recipe as well as many other delicious recipes for your kitchen in your cookbook.
And please notice this beautiful spring color palette. Again, a quilt that's never found its way into my house other than in that old trunk.
So my first crack at designing with a jelly roll actually came from a table runner that unfortunately you aren't going to see because it's at a different location. But I redid it. This baby is called Toss and Tumble. And it uses one jelly roll and a bunch of tumblers. And for a while we were really excited. This project wound up with a cut loose press with checker.
Oh, I remember that. Tell us about that cut loose press experience. Nothing against cut loose press.
We were so excited. You see, when you design patterns and you have somebody that wants to take your pattern and they want to promote it themselves, we get a little excited. What can we say?
We even sometimes do a happy dance.
We do. We might drink a little bit of wine as well.
Yeah, to celebrate.
And this pattern found its way to cut loose press, and you know, we had visions of just hitting it really, really big.
You know, big has a lot of different meanings, Louise.
It does, and big for us was getting checks that were 50 cents every month.
50 cents. It cost more to mail the check than it did what the check was actually
So they held
worth.
it until they would get to $3, and then they would send it to us. And no, that's not a lie. We've had many, many laughs over how great our experience was with Cut Loose Press. But we did appreciate their advertising and anybody that did purchase that downloadable pattern.
And Cut Loose Press really is a good way for you to make a quick quilt in an inexpensive pattern. So the joke was that we certainly weren't going to get rich and need to quit our daytime jobs in order to make it off of that. It took many months to even be able to buy a cheap bottle of wine.
Yeah, it did. BUNS Farm.
What have you got in your basket?
But then
next?
I have been on a roll. So I went from not knowing what to do with these things to having tons of ideas, and I burned up most of my jelly rolls.
Good for you. I still have my rolls.
We'll keep walking.
Promises, promises.
So this winter, we tap danced to stiletto, which is the fabric you see here.
Best way to do a stiletto.
Oh, by far, your feet don't even hurt after pressing the pedal down on this. This whole thing is strip pieced and it goes together really fast. The verdict is, of course, out whether we add in some fun quilting here or whether we add in doilies, which would be kind of a fun centerpiece. But if you've got a jelly roll and you've got focal fabric, tap dancing is for you. And then we might go back into the archives just a little bit. So here's a spoiler alert. Louise, do not get all of my projects finished.
I can't boast that remark. Mine are in a box where no one knows where they're at.
Imagine that. So we were going through a bunch of stuff and we came across this gem. Now I can be honest and tell you that the reason that this has stayed wadded up in a tub is because I wasn't real big on the border fabric. And the more that I look at it, the more that it grows and the more that I think it's okay and probably needs to be done. So this too takes one jelly roll. It is called Tiles of Friendship because the block is the friendship block. And it too, with the exception of a little bit of background fabric and some borders, is a relatively quick strip pieced quilt that you can put together. That's about a lap size project or would look really good over the end of a bed.
You maybe need to get that machine quilter hubba-hubbaing a little bit.
Yeah, what Louise?
Oh, you know, someday we might take the camera over and show you all about the long arm. But that's not today's adventure. Today we're talking about rolls.
I can't wait for that adventure over to the other side.
The dark side.
And then, I mean, the fishermen and I really like to go fishing and I really want the house to be full of quilts that I've made. And so this long quilt is for him because he's a heck of a lot taller than me. Split Shots is the name of this guy because of course sometimes you need split shots while you're fishing. And it too just takes one jelly roll and a little bit of yardage for your border. And it too is all strip pieced and it goes together really fast. This is a brand new fabric that's just coming out by Sandy Gervais called Lake Views.
It's Holly Taylor.
Holly Taylor, I'm sorry.
Maybe just a little too much wine.
A little bit. Holly Taylor, excuse me, Lake Views. And you can find that in stores now.
We also are going to have another quilt out of this collection that Lacey designed up that's quite favorable for those of you that like the great outdoors. That's for another episode though.
So, Thelma, what else do you have in your basket?
I have an unfinished project.
Oh, I thought you told me that you didn't have some of
Well,
those.
there was somebody doing a little snooping one day, and she dug out this beauty.
I remember that. It's twisted.
This also uses a jelly roll. You do have some waste with this, however.
And a wonky ruler.
A wonky ruler by Eleanor Burns.
Very fancy. Did you throw your fabric over the back of your shoulder while you were putting this together?
I did not.
Missed
I was scared I'd make a
opportunity.
pile, and you know, if you drink while you sew, you might end up with a trip.
But if you get a concussion, you can come and see me.
I could, but you know, this was before your PT days. So this I plan to show you on another episode some other day called Unfinished Projects Now Finished. And after she dug it out and laid it quite near my sewing machine just to remind me that I had one unfinished project in the building.
Only one.
I think I may add some wool applique to this, and I think it's going to be quite fetching.
I bet you're glad I dug it out.
Actually, I am.
Shocker. So on to those 1.5 inch rolls.
My
Thelma.
favorites.
Those are your favorite.
Yeah.
I remember back when they came out, you had 2 options. You have the option of making these adorable little stockings.
Those are quite cute.
Very, very cute.
They don't hold a lot, but they're certainly cute.
Good enough for holding a lump of coal. Or
a lump of coal. Who gets coal?
my brother.
Yeah.
Or out of the box, you have the ability to make a runner. And yes, if you notice, this runner too isn't finished. I, unlike Thelma, have lots of UFOs.
I am proud of her though, because when we dug it out of the box, she found fabric to add the border to it. So I believe this is going to get quilted quite quickly.
And also used. We just needed the right
pattern. Is this something that you've designed?
No, but we'll get to those.
Okay.
How about you? What have you designed with these lovely 2.5 inch squares?
Well, I dug out a honey bun that I received just to do some designing with. And it was called Nancy's Needles by Betsy Kucherin. It's a fabric grouping that's just coming out on the market right now. And I first worked with the fabric as a candy pack and did a little topper as a test back, which I don't have quilted yet, but I only made it 2 weeks ago, so you know, that's my free pass. But I also had a honey bun to work with out of Betsy's fabric. So I dug it out one day, sorted all my strips out so that I had them color coordinated, and thought that it was maybe not the most beautiful grouping of fabric that I'd ever worked with, because it has pink and yellow.
That is a little out of your color
wheel. But
it
also had black and a dark blue color to it and a very pretty green fabric in it. So I sorted my strips out. And I don't know about you, but have you ever tried sewing log cabin blocks? I always thought they were the easiest quilt block on the earth to sew, but for my brain, not so much. Whether I am doing it with water by my side or wine by my side, I just seem to have to need the seam ripper right next to my side as I'm working. But I'm quite pleased with my grouping that I have. So when we started designing with a pre-cut, our goal was to be able to use as much of that pre-cut as we could, as well as using that pre-cut the size that it was when we opened up our roll or our package that we had. I was so disgusted when the first step of a pattern was to trim it down, because why was I buying that pre-cut at that size in the first place? So after sorting my strips, deciding that the only way I could really wrap my head around working with my honey bun was a log cabin, because it was strips, I did this little guy. Well, I wasn't really liking it. And I actually sent Lacey a picture the day that I was working on it and said, I don't know about this. You know, it's really disgusting. I've spent the whole afternoon sewing and I don't like what I've done. but decided that I needed to persevere because sometimes you end up liking what you're doing if you just stick with it. So I didn't think I wanted a whole quilt like this. Part of it was just because I was going to get really bored with that same block over and over and over again.
That's my job.
Definitely. There's quite a difference between how our brains work. I need to do something and move on to something different, where Lacey, you ooze with patience. It's a gift.
Most of the time, as is speed.
Speed. In your pickup?
In the car.
Got it. Well, just watch out for the behind you.
Okay, Thelma.
All right. At any rate, I decided to do this little log cabin quilt. And if you can look at it closely, you'll see that I decided it wasn't just going to be an ordinary log cabin block. So I started out, and when I got around my center cornerstone unit, I decided I'd put a snowball on the corner. So you can see those right here. And I wanted to show you that you can actually leave your little snowball. You can sew it on and sew on the drawn line, cut away the corner and fold it back like you'll see on the top of the block. Or you can take your square and fold it in half and put it on the corner and sew your next strips, and you can stick your finger up in there so you make a little pocket. Now the pocket's kind of cool, but I have to tell you that when you start to quilt, you need to be really careful about the pockets because your sewing machine foot can grab a hold of the pocket and it's not going to lay flat anymore if you stitch over the top of it and happen to get it to stick up. Speaking from experience.
Was it that, or was it the wine?
I was not drinking the day I made the quilt. Can't drink alone, but that's why I have dogs.
So what else did you get from that
So
collection?
I put those little 9 blocks together, was kind of pleased with what I had done. But I had tons of strips left over. So I went on to this little log cabin variation, and I did a long table runner out of it. I quickly decided that my grouping of fabric needed a constant design in it, so I chose that black gray fabric, which I think grounded it. I still had tons of strips left over, so I decided just to keep going around them. This was a good way to burn up my strips, but I added a block in the corner so that I created a I can't remember what you call it. Like a courthouse step design to it. Thank goodness Louise is here. I still had fabric left over. So I decided I would take a look at what Louise had done with her fish quilt, because that was a good block to use as strips. And I made this little guy, which looks woven. And then remember last week we talked about binding?
Yeah, we did.
Well, today I did a binding that rates right up there with that gold binding on that Christmas quilt, let me tell you.
That says a lot.
I decided that I should give this little gadget a try. Now, any of you know me quite well would know that Darcy is not a gadget gal. I like the old-fashioned way of doing things, why I even dig out paper sometimes, but I do
newspaper.
cut. Anyway, I purchased this gadget because it was supposed to do this great prairie point binding. Well, after 3 hours today, I basted this prairie point binding to my quilt, which, looking at it through the camera, it looks pretty nice, but let me tell you, if somebody wants to buy or give this a try, just give us a call or send us an email, and we'd be more than happy to pass the ruler along to see how you like it. This was not my idea of a good prairie point finishing edge on a quilt, but again, it looks quite nice.
And
so,
she still had fabric left over.
I did. So let's just try that same block and set it a little bit differently. Add some decorative quilting, and we have a long, like Lacey would say, toilet tank
topper. I mean, everybody needs a cute top of the toilet tank, right?
Absolutely.
Must. Plus, doesn't show as much dust.
Especially if you use black or gray. Right. And I still had strips left over.
And curvy points.
They're straight if you step on them. So I made this little addition to your toilet tank cover holder out of the remaining. And then I had about 3 strips left that I guess I must have thrown in a garbage can because I couldn't find them in my
good fire starter
scrap bucket today.
Good fire starter.
But all those projects, there's 6 of them.
A 6-pack.
1 honey bun.
That's impressive.
And some
THELMA.
Additional yardage.
That is very impressive.
Thank you. Overachiever.
What can we say? She's the best. I learned from the best.
My dog just got up, begs to differ there, so let's just disregard those comments, please. What have you got left in the basket?
Louise has not done as much with honey buns. She really hasn't. So she's got big stockings for Christmas. And if they make 6, you get 3 each direction. 3 rights, 3 lefts.
Perfect.
A little bit bigger to hold the goodies for me and not my brother. Right?
Yep, that's right. Remember, he gets coal.
Yes, in the tiny stocking.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There's still a quilt left in our basket.
So, every once in a while, we have things that are rejects.
Really?
We do. I do.
So do I.
You get rejected a lot. So once upon a time, I bought an antique quilt that someday you're going to get to see. And I went home and I was all excited to duplicate it. And I was fairly pleased with what I got. And apparently, the people we sent it to really weren't pleased. And I lose interest in things after a while. And so this has sat up in my trunk for a long time. And you probably won't get to see a pattern of it. It'll just adorn my bed. But these, I don't know, we could call them circus wheels.
Yeah, sometimes we do get the feeling that magazine submissions can be kind of like a circus wheel.
They can be. Very
and
much so.
It's good in life if you can.
You have to laugh. We get rejected a lot. But it's better to take a shot and get rejected than to not take the shot at all. So if you've ever designed something and you want to submit it, go right on ahead. And don't be disappointed or don't be frustrated if they send back and tell you no, because sometimes you'll get it right.
Do you remember the one that we did get right?
I do.
Someday we're going to talk about that with you and actually show you the project.
Great stories behind our magazine quilts. Fabulous stories behind our magazine quilts.
But we want you to know or remember that, like Lacey said, in life, there's disappointments. There are times that we're rejected for something that we think we've done that is spectacular and we don't understand why they don't want to take it. But there's always a lesson to be learned in that. It makes us stronger.
Makes us laugh. And you learn a lot.
And we appreciate the times they say, yes, indeed, we want that project in your magazine, in our magazine.
We do.
Never give up.
Nope. That's a great message.
Well, do you think anybody noticed our old bread bowl? Do any of you remember these? I remember my mom made bread in a bowl like that. I remember as a little kid watching her. You don't have that remembrance because...
I just remember the bread machine. The highlight of that was the bread was really hard and crusty on the outside, but when you got rid of all that, the inside was just super soft and great with butter.
Can't beat fresh bread.
Not at all.
Whether it's coming from a package of plastic
that's expanded in your refrigerator,
that makes amazing caramel rolls for the love of your life.
That's it. Till next week.
Shalom, my friends. Till next Wednesday. We'll see you then.